Hey guys, it's Destin from Smarter Every Day. Wait, fuck! Hello and welcome to another installment of Behind the Glass with the Glass. I'm Nick Carver, and we got a lot to freaking talk about. Because it's been a while. I haven't done one of these in quite a long time, so a lot to cover. So this may drag on a little bit, but I'm on round number 2, so I'm either going to get through everything in 5 minutes or 2 hours. But either way, it's going to feel like 20 minutes to me. I got a lot to show you today. I got a new picture, got some camera porn for you, and then I want to talk about the mainstreamification of analog photography. But first, let me tell you what I'm drinking here. This is a Cuba Libre, or if you're a gringo, the Cuba Libre. This is essentially a rum and coke, I'm not gonna lie. But the reason I'm covering this today is I freaking love rum and coke, man. It's like my go-to summer drink. If I'm going somewhere where I don't want to have to think about what I want, margarita, daiquiri, Mai Tai, I don't know, just rum and coke me. I know I'll love it. Or hanging by the pool or something, rum and coke's great. But the Cuba Libre, in particular, has muddled lime in it, which is different than squeezed lime. Muddled lime is when you mash it in there. So it's a very simple recipe. You first slice up a lime, put it in the glass, muddle it a little bit. If you don't have a muddler, like I don't, you can use the back of a wooden spoon to muddle it up. And muddling is different than squeezing because not only does it get the juice out, but it gets some of the oils out of the skin. I throw in the ice next. I add the rum. I recommend an añejo rum, an aged rum. That's different from silver rum. Silver rum is clear. Añejo rum is typically gold, and that means it's been aged in oak barrels. That's going to add a little more flavor to this bad boy. I do about a 2-to-1 ratio Coke to rum. So I put in some rum, just eyeball it, and then top it off with Coke, and then you're cooking with gas. So a Cuba Libre sounds much better than rum and Coke with lime. Very simple recipe, and what can I say? It's delicious, man. I love a good Coca-Cola on a hot day, and you know, throw a little rum in there, and suddenly you got yourself an adult Coca-Cola. Next, behind the glass with the glass, I'm probably going to get into some more refined spirits instead of, you know, college cocktails. But this seems to fit pretty well because it's been a little warm lately and it's summer. All right, but let's talk photography. So, first and foremost, I got 3 things I want to cover today. Topic number 1. I have one more thing to say about CineStill. Don't go away. Please, don't turn it off. I know I've been talking a lot about CineStill lately. This is not going to carry on. I just have one more thought after doing all my CineStill stuff recently. Because if you saw my recent videos, I did an on location where I shot some CineStill, and then I did a follow-up video where I compared portrait to CineStill, and then I've been posting CineStill versus portrait pictures on my Instagram. And the feedback, the response has inspired this last little thing I just want to say. And then that'll be it. CineStill is finito in my life. Okay, so in posting the CineStill versus portrait shots on my Instagram, I did not realize how divisive CineStill was, CineStill 800T. It's funny, man. Some people hate it. Hate CineStill, especially halation. They absolutely freaking hate it. And I never understand getting that passionate about hating a particular film because it's, you know, just don't use it. It's fine. But I also understand it. I like CineStill. I think it's a valuable tool to have in my bag. But I think what's probably annoying to people is it's probably really annoying seeing a kind of shitty photo that people are just gushing over because it's got halation and it's got, you know, a cinematic look. I get it. That's super freaking annoying because you see someone who posted some kind of mediocre photo and people are freaking out because the halation, really. So then you start to hate halation. But really, it's just a tool in the wrong hands. That's all it is. It's a tool in some, you know, amateur hands, and they're just not using it properly, and they're relying on it as a crutch. So it's no different than saturation, like I said in my past video. You know, when I was younger in my photography, earlier on in my career, I was cranking the saturation on everything. I mean, I made my pictures look like freaking comic book frames. They're so saturated. Because it was a crutch. I was not that good of a photographer, and it was a way to get easy wows out of people. And some people use halation for the same purpose. So I get not liking halation for that reason. But don't hate the tool, hate the game, or something like that. My point is, I want to reiterate something I said in my last video, which is halation is a tool that can be utilized for, you know, enhancing the photo, but just don't let it be the most interesting thing about the photo. And I want to show you a picture I took recently, one I've been dying to take for a while now, actually since February. And this is a perfect example where the halation was a really valuable tool for me, but it wasn't necessarily the crux of the photo. Before I show you the photo, I just need to remind you, I love Retrowave. And you may remember from a previous video where I look like a jackass. Not that one, the other one where I look like a jackass. I like Retrowave, that kind of 80s pseudo-futuristic, pseudo-retro, Miami at night, Tokyo with neon lights, all that kind of stuff, Lamborghini Countaches, whatever. That Retrowave vibe, I dig it, man. And this photo I wanted to take was just oozing with that Retrowave vibe. But I kept putting it off because I couldn't figure out how to photograph it. I couldn't figure out how to execute the photo in such a way that was going to capture that Retrowave vibe that I wanted. And then CineStill came along in my life. CineStill made an entrance. And the halation ended up being the thing that I was waiting for this photo. So the halation in this photo, I think, is very important aspect of it. All right, let me just show you the photo. All right, so 6x17. This is a shop here in Orange that sells, you know, exotic cars. They have a DeLorean that they park out front sometimes. I always love seeing a DeLorean, especially with the door up. Who doesn't? They got a Testarossa in there, beautiful red Testarossa. But in the window, they happen to have this gorgeous white 1992 Lamborghini Diablo. And then these neon signs out front. Vintage exotic cars and buy, sell, consign. You know, just Retrowave galore, baby. It was just asking for it, especially with that Diablo in the window, which it wasn't always the same car. Sometimes I'd drive by and it'd be a Porsche or whatever, but it had the Lamborghini Diablo. And this is a picture where the halation around the neon lights really adds to the vibe that I was trying to capture here. I think on Portra, which I didn't do a side-by-side comparison here, but I think on Portra this would be just a slightly less interesting photo. It wouldn't be way worse, it would still be something I'm probably proud of, but I think the halation really helps here because that whole Retrowave vibe is kind of the, you know, like I said, Miami at night, in the rain, Tokyo, neon lights, a little bit of glow here and there, splashes of color. It helps with that. So CineStill, don't write it off completely if you think the halation's a crutch and a joke and whatever. It's a tool. And just like a hammer is not the right tool for every job, halation is not the right tool for every job. But when you need a hammer, it's the best tool you can grab. So halation can be good. You just got to use it, you know, when the time is right. So that's it for CineStill 800T. I'm not going to be talking too much about it anymore. So on to topic 2. Camera porn, baby. Let's look at some sexy camera action. And I'm talking about this because in the last video, a few people asked about the tilt shift adapter on my RZ. I always get questions about this because it's a kind of obscure item. But I want to talk a little bit more about my RZ with the 75mm tilt shift adapter. But first, let me refresh myself. Okay. So the 75mm tilt shift lens for the RZ67. There's actually two versions of this. There's a 75mm that has the tilt shift built into it. That actually might only be a shift lens. I'm not sure, it might not have tilt. But that actually has a knob built into it on the side. You attach it directly to the camera, and it's a shift lens. So that allows you to keep the camera perfectly level, and then shift up if you want an upward perspective like on a building, shift down if you want a downward perspective on more foreground. Very similar to a large format camera with the lens and film movements in that sense. This is the other version where the 75mm is actually its own lens and the tilt shift adapter is separate. So this is called the 75mm SB. And the SB stands for short barrel. And that means exactly what it says. It means the barrel of the lens is a little shorter than it should be. That's so that it can attach to the tilt shift adapter, which adds a little bit of distance to the lens. Now, a couple things you'll notice about the lens itself. The front is huge. So attaching filters to this is somewhat unrealistic. You can get big filters for this, they do exist, but like I use the Lee filter system, the square filters, rectangular filters, and there's no adapter ring big enough on my 100mm Lee filter system. So I actually created a filter holder that's this kind of Frankenstein looking thing. I use this moldable putty called Sugru, S-U-G-R-U. You mold it in your fingers and then it eventually hardens up to like a rubber. And I use that to create this filter holder that goes over the front of this giant lens element. So that's one notable thing about the 75mm SB. And then the other thing, of course, being that it's shorter mount to the camera. Now the tilt shift adapter is its own item, and this attaches between the lens and the camera, and all it does really is it allows the lens to move independently of the camera. So you have rise and fall. You loosen a knob here that unlocks it, and then you gear it up or down. That's actually my favorite thing about this, is that it's geared. So you can do very precise incremental adjustments. It's not just a free-formed sliding thing. So you can gear it up and down. By the way, they call it a tilt shift adapter. Shift is technically side-to-side movement, which this doesn't have. It doesn't have side-to-side movement. It has rise and fall. So this would really be a tilt, rise and fall adapter. It's not technically shift. But in generic terms, people kind of call any movement where the lens is moving laterally around shift. But anyway, technicalities. So that's the shift part. And then the tilt part, again, you have a knob to unlock, and then you gear it either backward or forward to tilt. And this, of course, is used to control depth of field. You can get some, you can utilize what's called the Scheinflug principle, which allows you to kind of lay down the depth of field on certain pictures. So the question I often get asked is, can you use this tilt shift adapter on a standard lens? So like, let's say the Mamiya 110mm. Could you use this on here? Now it will let you attach it, but it doesn't really work. And it'll let you take pictures. What I mean by it doesn't work is that you're pulling the lens further away from the camera when you do that. And so the focus can't go to infinity. You can only focus on nearby subjects. So I suppose if you were shooting products or something like that, maybe you could attach a normal lens to the tilt shift adapter and then use the shift or the rise and fall and then the tilt. But it would only be on subjects that are relatively close to the camera, because when you pull the lens away from the camera, it can't focus on infinity anymore. But also you'd have to consider the lens may not have the coverage, meaning the image circle, big enough to move it around. You wouldn't be able to rise and fall and tilt, because it might make the image circle leave the edge of the frame, and then you get vignetting. So the short answer is no, you can't really use standard lenses on this. The long answer is, if it has enough coverage and you're shooting something nearby, then you probably could. Now, what happens if you want to use the 75mm but you don't want to use the tilt shift adapter? Because maybe you're not planning on shifting or tilting, and it's just a lot of extra bulk. Well, there's two options for that. You can attach the 75mm directly to the camera, but you're going to have to extend the focus a lot just to get to infinity. And that's to make up for the distance that this would normally be taking up. So you'd have to extend it about that far just to get to infinity. That's one option. The other option is you can attach this lens to the camera along with the Mamiya spacer for SB lenses. And this is specifically designed for SB lenses when you don't want to use the tilt shift adapter. So all you do is you attach the spacer to the lens, and then it becomes a normal lens. It's got the proper length barrel, and you can attach that to the camera, and then you don't have to extend the focus beyond normal range. It operates just like a normal 75mm. So the spacer for SB lenses, honestly, I've never really used it because I pretty much always use this lens with the tilt shift adapter. But that's how you would use it without the tilt shift adapter. So really cool piece of equipment. It's a fun lens. I shoot a lot of architecture, so having the shift or rise and fall capability is very beneficial to me. And yeah, it's a nice piece of equipment to have, but it's a very obscure piece of equipment. Now there's limitations, of course, the main one being that there's no shift side to side, which I really wish it did, because there are situations where you want to shoot straight on, but you actually want to be off center, or you want to be off center and you want to recenter it. Having shift would be nice, but you know, you can't have everything. It's a cool piece of equipment regardless. So that's the Mamiya 75mm with the tilt shift adapter. All right. Now, the last topic I want to talk about, and this one's kind of a big one. The mainstreamification. Yes, that is a word. It's probably not, I'm making it up. But the mainstreamification of analog photography. So what I mean by that is the analog photography community is growing. It's been growing for years. And it's gotten to a point where it seems like it's getting a little mainstream. Like lots of people I hear from via email or talking to in person, they're like, hey, I'm thinking of getting a film camera. I want to start trying some film. And it's like, really, you? I never would have thought you'd get into film photography. Like, it's becoming a little more common now, to the point where it's not unusual anymore. Like, anyone who's been in the analog community for a while, you remember when you would be out with a film camera and people would be like, do they even still make film? Where can you even get it developed? Do they even have labs anymore? It's like, yes, they still have labs. Yes, they still make film. But now it's kind of like, oh, you shoot film, that's cool. Yeah, I'm thinking of getting a film camera. I got an old Canon AE1 that I might dust off too. So it's getting a little mainstream. Perfect evidence of that is Smarter Every Day, Destin over at Smarter Every Day, did a video recently where he talked about film photography. He even talked about the look of film versus digital and how he can tell, and how it's got a certain emotion to it and a certain feel to it that digital doesn't have. And he went to a lab and went through the whole developing process. It's a really great video, and I love Destin from Smarter Every Day. He makes awesome videos. He did a series not that long ago on nuclear submarines that was really fascinating. But he's huge, man. He's big on YouTube. Millions of views and followers. And he's talking about film photography. It's crazy. It's mainstream now. Oh, and also Kai. You know, sweet saccharine voice that makes me feel things. Kai, with the deep, gorgeous voice. I think he released a book that's like everything you need to know about film photography. I always thought of him as kind of primarily a digital guy. He came from Digital Rev and all that, so kind of a, you know, that's where I pigeonholed him. But he's putting out a book for film photography. He wouldn't put that out if there wasn't a market for it. So film photography is getting pretty mainstream now. And when I see that happening, I'll be honest, I have mixed emotions. And I would imagine anyone who's in the community might share similar emotions. So I wanted to talk those through with you a little bit, because there's upsides and downsides to this thing getting bigger, to this community getting bigger. So let's talk first about the downsides and basically the things that concern me when I see the community getting bigger. And these may or may not be justified, but I'm just going to be honest here. So the first one is very practical. Dwindling camera and lens supply. You know, hardly anybody's making film cameras anymore. And they're certainly not making film cameras like this anymore, like complex electronic film cameras. So there's only so many available, and the more people that get into it, the less cameras there are for everyone to use. And that's a real problem. And that leads to increasing prices. So just to give you an example, this RZ67, I bought it in 2012 with a 50mm lens. So it was a kit, 50mm lens, a film back, and the RZ with the waist level finder. I bought it in 2012 for $470 on eBay. Those are going for about $1,300 to $1,500 now, an RZ with a 50mm. I bought the 75mm short barrel in 2014 for $400. Specialized piece of equipment, so it wasn't cheap. That goes now for $550, so that's gone up a little bit too. The tilt shift adapter, this thing, I bought it in 2014 as well for $320. These go up for upwards of $1,000 now, because again, very specialized piece of equipment. There's not that many of them. Even the spacer, the SB spacer, I bought that also in 2014 for $30. $30 from KEH. It's going for $100 to $130 now. Just this kit alone has over doubled in price. And you see that across the board. Everything's getting more expensive because there's just less of it and more people want it. So that part of it sucks. The bigger the community gets, the harder it is to come by these things at a reasonable price. Another problem that I think is more the reason I'm concerned about it getting bigger is growing communities or big communities, from what I've seen, can tend to get too obsessed with gear and tips and tricks and Lightroom plugins and all that other bullshit that you hate about the digital photography community. The bigger the community gets, the more that there's going to be. It's just law of numbers, mathematics, whatever you want to call it. The more people that are involved, the more people are trying to put out a product, the more variety of people get involved, and they might be interested in things like freaking, you know, the maximum resolution of the RZ67, like stupid stuff that just doesn't really matter that much and distracts from the art of analog photography. That's the biggest thing I'm worried about with the community getting bigger. I hope, and I predict, I guess, it's never going to get as bad as the digital community. Digital photography got so freaking annoying with the megapixel wars and who's got the sharpest lens and who's got the latest camera, and you got to buy a new camera every 13 months to keep up with the latest technology. All that technical stuff can start to become the center of the conversation, and that sucks because this is an art form, and it should be about the art form. We should be talking about the important stuff of your subject and composition and artistry and color theory and all sorts of stuff like that. That's the cool stuff. That's the important stuff. Obsessing over technical things and megapixels and resolution and whatever can kind of ruin it, for me at least. So that's one thing I really worry about with the community getting bigger, but I'm predicting and I'm hopeful that that's not going to happen as bad as the digital community because there's just no room for it. We can't have megapixel wars. We can't have, you know, ISO wars, stuff like that. So, and then the final thing that I think is a downside, and this kind of ties into the last one, but the bigger a community gets, the more it tends to attract dilettantes and tourists. So what I mean is people that are just dabbling in it and they're not really passionate about it. They're just bored. And they think film photography might be something to alleviate their boredom. And that's fine. Film photography can be something to alleviate the boredom. But if the community gets too full of people like that, it can start to lead to things like megapixel wars and ISO wars and all that other nonsense because they're not really serious about like it as an art form. They're serious about it as like, ooh, fun cameras, and you know, is my camera better than yours, and what's the ideal aperture to get the depth of field I want? Oh, teach me about hyperfocal distance. That kind of stuff, just from teaching for so many years, I tell you, is very prominent in people that are kind of dilettantes and tourists. Like they're not going to stick with this. They're not that serious about it. They're not that interested in the artistry of it. They're just interested in the equipment more than anything, and kind of the novelty of it. And the bigger the community gets, the more of that stuff can start to surface, because I think it just attracts dilettantes and tourists. But I know I'm kind of sounding like an ass talking about that, like, oh, I'm taking it so seriously and all that. I'm not trying to put myself above anybody else. It is a fun hobby, and I think anyone should get into it that might thinks they you know, would alleviate their boredom a bit with it. I just don't want it to become all about that. You know, let's concentrate on the art. Let's concentrate on the process, not get too hung up on the equipment and everything. But let's talk about the upsides. Let's end on a high note. So the bigger the community gets, the more filmmakers are going to keep making film. And this is a problem, man. Films are getting discontinued. Fuji especially. They don't seem as dedicated to the community as Kodak is. But the more people there are shooting film, that's our insurance to keep the film companies making film. As much as we don't want to admit it, it's a business. And they're only going to do it if there's profit to be had. And the only way there's going to be profit to be had is if enough people are buying film. So that's a good thing. The more people that get into it, the more people buying film, the more likely it is Kodak's going to keep making film. And Fuji might bring back a film or two. That'll be the day. Right now, film prices kind of keep going up. The more people shooting film, the more likely they are to not increase film prices. Because the more bulk they can make it in, the cheaper it gets. Quick side note on that. Everyone should stop complaining about high film prices. Stop complaining about it. Because the thing is, you have an alternative. If you don't want to pay for film, shoot digital, man. You don't have to pay for film over there, so stop complaining about it. If you want to shoot film, it's going to cost some money. And by the way, you can dramatically reduce the cost of film by taking fewer pictures. And I don't mean restricting yourself from taking photos. Stop bracketing, you know, get better at metering, don't bracket. Shoot smaller formats if it's a big problem. But mainly, pick and choose your pictures more. You know, maybe you're taking too many photos. I know it feels good, but maybe you should be picking and choosing your shots. Cut it down by 50%. That will reduce your expense. I know it's tempting to just blame Kodak for increasing prices, but you got to realize the EPA is breathing down their neck. Chemicals and chemistry and all that kind of stuff is harder to get. Supply lines, especially right now because of COVID, are really hard to get. That's why there's silver caps on 35mm Portra right now. They couldn't get black ones. The supply chains are all messed up, so they just went with silver instead of shutting down the production. So we're living in modern times. It's not as easy to get these chemicals. We have much stricter regulations on what's okay to put into film, what kind of chemicals are okay to use, and if you do use them, it might be much more difficult to do it without endangering the workers, all that kind of stuff, because we have new OSHA regulations. All that contributes to higher prices. So it's just the nature of the beast. Also, inflation's going up like insane, so prices are going to go up anyway. But, end of rant, my point is, the more people who get into it, the less likely prices are going to continue increasing on film. So that's a good thing. It's good the community's grown. Another good thing, this might bring new cameras to market, if you can imagine that. Look, there's already some companies, what? Nothing happened. Come here. Come here. Nothing happened. Relax. All right. As I was saying, there are some companies that are putting out cameras, and God bless them. Like Dora Goodman, what she's doing with her team, putting out 3D printed, open source files, medium format cameras, pinhole cameras, really cool stuff. So there's these like small boutique companies. There's a large format camera maker in Italy, like Stenopeca Cameras, that makes just these gorgeous large format cameras. He's just like one guy in Italy. So there are some camera makers going, you know, putting out product right now. But if we want a complex, like medium format 35mm camera, something like the RZ67, the only companies that are capable of doing that are big conglomerate megacorps. You need the R&D department to deal with these complex electronics, to make lenses. That's the biggest problem, by the way, is the lenses. Lenses are tough to make. You can't really get like a mom and pop shop making some lens like this Mamiya 75mm. So we need big companies to get interested in the film photography community. And the only way they're going to do that is if they see dollar signs on everybody's head. So it's good to have a lot of people getting involved in the film photography community, because maybe Nikon will release a new 35mm film camera if they think they can make a few shekels on it. And I say Nikon because, let's be honest, Canon, is Canon really going to release a film camera? Sony, they really going to release a film camera? Unless they can figure out how to make bangers out of film, I don't think Sony's getting involved. Fuji would be a very likely contender for making film cameras, except they're so based on the APS-C format now that I don't think they could easily translate to like a 35mm. But Nikon could. They got all the lenses, they got the camera bodies already. They could just repurpose some of the machines to make film cameras instead of digital. So hopefully that comes along. My biggest dream is that someone is going to resurrect Mamiya. A new RZ67? Ooh, my God, that thing would sell thousands. The other upside to the community getting bigger, good news for me and my channel. The more people get involved, the more you know, people might watch my YouTube videos. So that's cool, but that's a selfish reason. Another good thing: new labs, new products, new scanner. Maybe, you know, maybe some manufacturer will come along and release a really nice film scanner, something that, you know, blows the Epson out of the water, because that's kind of the only quote-unquote high-end option for home scanning right now, short of doing it with a DSLR. So that'd be great if some manufacturer came out with a new scanner. And then finally, you know, this is a great upside. I talked about how all the camera supply is dwindling, and that's a problem, and prices are going up. But it's also inspired some people to get into the camera repair side of things. You know, 5-10 years ago, it was really hard to find someone to repair a Mamiya RZ67. It's still kind of hard, but it's a little bit easier now. And there's this great project in Finland called the Camera Rescue Project. They're doing the Lord's work, man. They are basically rescuing thousands and thousands of cameras. And not only that, they're teaching the next generation of technicians how to repair these cameras. So they're actually doing something proactive to make sure we have cameras to use in the future. Because we need repair technicians, and we need these cameras to be fixed, because it doesn't seem like anyone's coming out with a new RZ67. So it's really great that by the community growing, it's creating all these cottage industries of new repair technicians, new camera makers, new accessory makers, maybe new film makers. You know, some company could start up and actually start making a brand new film. It's all in the realm of possibility if the community gets big enough. So, you know, as much as my knee-jerk reaction to the community getting bigger might be, let's pump the brakes, I don't want any tourists here. I should just be open to it, because it's going to benefit me as much as anybody, maybe more than anybody. So mainstreamification of analog photography, something to think about. All right, I have no idea how long that took. I haven't been drinking a whole lot lately, so this thing's hitting pretty hard. So I'm going to go. But I recommend trying yourself a Cuba Libre. Simple ingredients, easy to make at home, and very refreshing on a nice summer day. And you know, if you find yourself a good deal on an RZ67 with a 75mm and a tilt shift adapter, jump on that bad boy, because it's a great piece of equipment. All right, that's it, folks. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Cheers.